Gloria, and this is Farther Down the Rabbit Hole for Manhattan Neighborhood Network, and I'm streaming live on rabbitholecentral.tv with Harold Channer, and I wanted to continue the discussion that we were having. I was just saying that when Nico Haupt said that this was all talk, you took that in, you didn't defend it, and you said that you were very much into action, and that these thoughts...
No, if I may?
Yeah. Okay.
I'm really not into action.
Okay.
I'm not into action more than I'm into... I think we have to get the action plan first. The context that we're going to assert. We're going through a process that is just on so many fronts absurd and unjust and unenlightened. And it's coming from so many quarters. There's an endless array of criticism, injustice, inappropriateness, and so forth manifest in the action. I don't think I am not particularly into doing it, except I'm all in favor of protesting the absurdity of the political thing and everything. But I am more into trying to reach out to where we could get an understanding of what the hell is going on in a comprehensive context. So it's more educational and trying to get the pattern right to which we're able to assert. So I'm not an activist. I got a lot of friends that are. I always have been. I got in a lot of trouble for that.
But Harold, what I meant was you can kind of understand that if you embrace a philosophy that wealth is not labor-based, then when people lose their jobs, and if you say that at the wrong time, they think that you're hard-hearted or you're not realistic, that people have to have these jobs, otherwise they can't pay their rent. They think you're not practical.
And yes, that's always been a charge against me, that I'm not practical, because the real world has certain demands, and people are within systems that are important for their own functioning. I mean, every interest group has an interest in maintaining the flow of income and support for what they're doing, and that goes out to an individual. And that you don't have it all. They need to have. You have to pay the rent, and they have to get food to eat for their babies, and they have to, the responsibility. And the systems by which that is done, in my way of thinking, are inappropriate. And the effective critique of that system seems not yet to have quite matured. I think it's getting there, but it's been caught up within a dialectic of socialism, capitalism, and all of these kind of argumentations and so forth. And I don't think we've got, let's say, the progressive movement doesn't yet have an agreement on these questions that relate to everyday politics and the everyday structuring of our social, political, economic institutions.
Yeah, but then...
But it is at a theoretical level. It's at a theoretical level of understanding that we need the thought.
But how do you...
We need something new.
But how do you bring the theory into practice?
Well, I don't know, really. It may be a cop-out, Paula. You and I are here talking over a streaming thing with an audience of one, and it may not grow. But it's just that it's at the level of education. So this is like capitalism, that sort of thing, that she believes in a mixed economy. And I certainly do. I think we want both a private sector and we want a public sector. And we want a situation, and in the economics that I like, when you get the economics, you take Fuller on the one hand in a large context, and you get the economics, it seems to me the main stumbling block, and I may be wrong, I really don't know, but is this all economic theory from Adam Smith to Ricardo to Marx to Schumpeter to Van Hayek and to Friedman in Chicago. Naomi Klein talks a lot about the Friedmanites in Chicago, the free marketeers and so forth, to Keynes and so forth, that all economic theory is essentially, they'll deny it, but it's all essentially based upon on a labor theory of value. And if we're not going to distribute according to need the capabilities that we have, and that seems to be what happens in the socialist thing, if you're going to have distribution of the capital formation for us to do what we're technologically capable of doing at one end of the equation, you're looking for equity and growth. And then if you're going to have it, and then the idea, if you have a thing where you got the capital formation and then the distribution of the income is two things you're taking into account, then you're going to have some, and then if the trend in terms of the input to production, on the one hand, labor, all human labor, and that's all intellectual and physical input to production on one side of an equation. This is another chart that could be up on that think tank wall to consider. If you turn it, and you got one, I got one on my side if you go to it, but it says, like in the case of the United States, from 1776, that's the year of the wealth of nations, the invention of the steam engine, the United States of America, and then you were to trace that in our economy, the input of labor in all of its manifestations, and then the input of everything else. And that would include technology, all the patent rights, all the intangibles, land, all the other things other than human activity. And you were to trace that in Tom Jefferson's time, it was probably only about 10% of the actual input to production was done by anything other than massive application of human labor.
Right. Okay,
you had all the things come. And now if you were to trace that up, of course, this is from Louis Kelso, who I like, positive, somebody to consider, that it has gotten to the point in the modern experience where probably only about 10% of the input to production was human labor, intellectual or physical. So those things have been reversed within the birth of our republic. And yet we distribute all income to the masses of the people through labor criteria. So your political process is only, how are you going to get the poor serfs doing something which can guarantee that they have the right to have a little bread to eat because they're doing something that 90% of the production has to do with the ownership of capital assets that are held by a tiny plutocratic class. They own all the technology. They own all that which is producing the wealth. And the trends are more and more toward having that be the source of production rather than the labor input of the people. And yet all economic distribution to the people goes through labor, through jobs. The template is set by those who own it. It's sort of like the king in a feudal pattern. They own everything, and they have serfs. So it's like a kind of serfdom to me, and I think you're going to have to get some practical.
No, you're not on a tangent, not by any means.
But that would be introducing a population that is liberated to do what they want to do, rather than what a system says, if you don't do what we tell you to do, you're going to starve. And that's what they've been doing. The leaders have been doing throughout all of human history, and it's outdated. They're going to have to let the people be free, and then they can do things like further down the rabbit hole.
But Harold,
or whatever they're interested in.
But Harold, where does that come from? Is this going to be a gift bestowed by the rich to the poor to have the leisure to wake up and see, or do the poor somehow in between the grind and the worry sort of wake up and figure it out? Maybe the change happens as a function of figuring it out, and that the rich, too, are just as lacking in freedom, because like what Webster Tarpley said, all economic systems, almost all of them, is apology for the rich. They're just apologists. Yeah. And I know that you and he agreed on that, but then there wasn't an agreement. I'm not sure why. But I do see what you mean, that for example, he embraces 9/11 truth as the most powerful, effective way to really strike most deeply at the problem, and yet it doesn't seem as though the problem comes from the rich and the few. Although they may have so much power and ownership and leisure, just because they're the recipients of 30,000 shoes being made and they didn't lift a finger, still, I don't think the point is to have, like my brother said, the objective is to not work.
Your brother says that?
Yeah. I'm going to...
Well, I think that's wonderful, but I think it's really important to have a distinction between a job and work.
Right.
Somebody at work, a painter, I've got a lot of friends of mine are artists, and I've known my friend Alex. He was at the easel painting, and I couldn't drag him away from that easel. And it had nothing to do with making money or anything. He was at his work.
Right.
Now, that's really important, work and participation and the things you can... But what it seems to me like is we may be poised on a point of liberation. It's like it's a liberation of the human spirit to be interested in things other than what the masters of the capital ownership tell us we must do in order to have some bread to eat and threaten us with that. So we get to have a little piece of cake maybe every other Sunday.
But it sounds...
It's all...
But Harold?
Yeah.
It still sounds like when they tell us that we must do this, that if we don't do this, that they will have been thwarted in their soul's purpose, which I don't think is the case. I think they don't really know what they think that we should be doing.
I think you're right.
And what my question is, can we go back and forth, saying you're playing this game, this particular round of the game with a lot of clams, and most people don't have that many clams, but at the end of the day, the game success is not determined about whether you have more clams or less clams. There's something else about the game, and that's been distracting us.
Well, yeah, there's power.
Power.
And the ability of some to have people... See, the templates are all being set by those who own the capital assets.
But where do you get the power?
That's the thing. Those are ultimately, those are things that finance the think tank. And those are the ones who set the grants. And those are the ones who do it. And the people are all... It's like in Versailles, you had a king, and everybody was was following what the king did. They had an Argent regime. People got their identity. They got whole institutions, the whole educational system.
Right.
Everything is structured that way, and it's all owned by the few. And those people are like, what would you call it, fishy? Or they're subservient to those who have it. And, they got hierarchies. You got a senior vice president who bosses a lot of people around below him, and they've all got their identities wrapped up in that. Imagine a world where everybody had on their own the ability to have what they need reasonably to live well and grow in a good way, and they were free to do what they want. So what would they do? The people in positions of authority say, we can't have that, those poor dears wouldn't know what to do.
Right. But what about us poor dears? I mean, where does the wake up start?
I'm saying we're the slaves. And it's just the same thing about those darkies wouldn't know if we didn't tell them to get out and pick the cotton in the cotton field, you know? That's what I'm saying, but that's my thinking. But that's an economic thing, political thing, and it isn't heard anywhere because it's very inconvenient to all our inherited institutions.
It's inconvenient.
Just like it was inconvenient to all the assize courts in feudal Europe that there was this idea of democracy coming out of the United States of America across the ocean. What's this idea that they would know what to do? We're going to need institutions like public access television, community theater, all kinds of expressions of the human spirit that have nothing to do with counting beans or sitting in a cubicle office somewhere in a corporation or doing all the things that they assign, make work and things that they assign. People are going to become like an artistic thing where people can be concerned with the important things like love. All the most important values are ground up within this overweening sense that everything is economic and political. And so you'd have like a renaissance of the human spirit. And then you're in a situation where you want the person next to you to do the best they can. And somebody says, go over there. They say, well, I don't want to go over there. I'm going to go over here where it feels right. And then you're going to play trumpet with the guy you want to play with. And that, and you're going to, and so we're going to need a lot of institutions like public access, communication, theater, all kinds of artistic expression. And people are free not to have to starve if they want to do what they want to do, and what they want to do might have some meaning in terms of like each individual cell is important doing what they want to do rather than what the lords of the universe or the political leaders dictate they must do in order to eat and keep the power structures in order.
What about
but we don't have that anywhere because it's at the theoretical level of economics primarily that informs the whole political and sociological pattern.
Now say that again.
And that needs to be changed.
Say that last sentence again.
Only that we need to have it's all based, the basic thing is there's one thing at the practical level is to address the economic theory. How do we determine production of goods and services and so forth? How do we deal with that when it's changed fundamentally? And the labor input. How do we relate the people to the way things are actually being produced and give them an ability to take advantage of that? It's good. Everyone should have a computer. Everyone should have a car, a good ecological hybrid, whatever. All these things we can do at a design level. And they can, and in the end, they're going to need, unless they're going to just get totally dangerously fascistic and everything like that, they're going to need the people to have the ability to buy what can be produced. Because a lot of the things that are going to be produced are like clean air and all the other kinds of ecological things. And then you're not going to have to waste people's lives. They take women. Why are not the women with their children taking care of their little babies instead of going out and picking up paper somewhere for some bureaucrat telling them they have to go out and earn their living and all the baloney around the work ethic and all that sort of thing.
Right.
An artist doesn't have to be told what to do. And probably, I like that idea. Somebody said that the Balinese have a saying, we have no art, we do everything as well as possible. So what would a liberated humanity look like? We don't have one. It's enslaved to outdated institutions, in my humble opinion. There has to be a communication of that idea, and then the inklings to the ways in which we could set things up differently, politically, economically, sociologically, to have a liberated humanity where everybody in that orchestra would be playing their own instrument to their full maximum capability. And if we get to that, we may then have a resonancy that will interaccommodate us to universe that we've passed the test. And it looks like we're not getting very much leadership in that direction. And probably we're going to entropy and join entropy and destroy humanity because we're sticking to old, outdated ideas that have been transcended by the zeitgeist or by the evolution of broader patterns of consciousness. And what we look forward to is like streaming down the rabbit hole.
But but even that, Harold, if I really think carefully about it, where did I get the energy to do this? Because you do need power. Everybody needs power. And the gripe always is that the poor people don't have enough power, and yet Victor Taplin was telling me his experience in the housing courts, that it's horrific how many people are losing their houses and how scary it is. And at the same, but at the same time, Harold, there are people who are getting so much welfare, they're on the dole, and they spiral down, and they're not necessarily becoming like your artists that you're talking about, where they don't need to be told what to do.
Well, they don't get the dole very much. They take it away. Mostly they will take away from those. I mean, there's some things, one from like Franklin Roosevelt, thank God for, and the New Deal and these kind of things, and they get some institutions in place, but you'll notice that they're attacking all of those institutions where somebody gets something for nothing. It's okay for the capitalists to get something for nothing. They get richer as they sleep. But we can't have that happen to the people, because the people have to be ordered by those who own the capital, and if you don't, you're going to have anarchy, and it's going to be a terrible disaster. And the people responsible for those historically inherited authoritarian institutions feel they have a responsibility to maintain that, and they got a lot of people who work under them or answerable to them, and they can do away with that. They would try to do away with that, anything. And they would say it's because you have to earn your way, and they put the wool over our eyes by talking about the work ethic is good for us, but it's not good for them.
Well, let me put it this way. If you're talking about freedom, even a king, I would think, would get to a certain point in his evolution where he wants to be free of the identity of him as the owner and the final, person to make the judgment calls. In other words, I know I'll talk about my experience with Vedic and Indian knowledge. In their literature, periodically, you have stories of great kings who would totally walk away from their kingdoms to seek enlightenment. And if you understand the responsibility of a king, let's say he was a good king, not somebody who was just cruel and he liked to make people jump when he said jump, but that someone who said, I want to know who I am more than this ownership, because Kelso is talking not about labor-based wealth, but about ownership. I'm saying, is there a place beyond ownership? That if you, like say, I have a nice apartment in Gramercy Park, and I definitely feel the energy there. I feel like I'm more creative in that area. But at the same time, I also have a sense that I'm more than my apartment. You know what I'm saying? I'm more than the owner. I'm more than the ownership of this, and I may never know until I test that. In which case, I'm saying, could we not, as the less powerful, entice those with more power to take a challenge, to go to a new party? And likewise, can we, you and me, Harold, as very powerful people compared to the...
Hello, Paula?
Yeah?
I got a call waiting. I'm going to keep talking. Okay. I'm going to take your call waiting. Keep talking.
This is Harold Channer, and we've been having a very interesting discussion because I want to get more into how we can achieve our abundance, how we can achieve new realities, in spite of the fact that we're constantly being told...
Paula.
Yeah.
That is George telling me he's a block from the studio ready to tape the program.
Oh, so you better go.
We're going to do two programs.
Okay, well, good luck on your show.
One of them is with John Kowalski about streaming.
Excellent.
And so that'll be good. And the other one's about classical music. So
okay, thanks for taking this time.
We touched the surface again, and that thing you bring up is very important. That question is very important about that and everything.
Right.
And,
well, we're coming...
I have a tendency to talk too much.
No, you didn't. We'll develop this more and have a nice shoot at M&N, okay, Harold?
Where are you ever going to get back to Gotham City where you belong?
Tomorrow.
Oh, good.
Okay.
The world will be a far better place when Glory is back in town.
Thanks a lot.
I got to get dressed and go tape a couple programs at M&N and continue this stuff.
Okay, bye, Harold.
Okay, talk to you later, darling. Okay, get say hello to Molly.
Okay, I will.
Bye. Okay, bye-bye. Over and out. Down.
That was Harold Channer, and I want to thank you for joining me, Paula Gloria, here on Farther Down the Rabbit Hole, and for those of you who've been listening.